Earth's last defender loved the Alien Empress and changed the fate of two worlds. The wind howled across the barren landscape of Earth's final stronghold. Once a vibrant city filled with life, it now lay in ruins, a shadow of its former self. The skies were dark, almost permanent, with smoke rising from the last battles fought. There was no hope left for Earth. Humanity was nearly extinct, and yet, standing amidst the ashes, was Earth's last defender, Corporal David Bryant. David had seen the world crumble. He had watched the cities fall, the forests burn, and the oceans turn into hostile swamps. Now he stood at the edge of a broken wall, peering out at the alien fleet that hovered in the sky like a dark omen. They had come from the stars, relentless in their pursuit to wipe humanity from existence. The Galactic Alliance, as they called themselves, had crushed every last resistance. Earth was their final prize. The day had begun like any other. David had spent years fighting a war that seemed endless, pushing back the invaders with dwindling resources. His days were filled with gunfire, explosions, and the faces of the fallen. But today felt different. Something in the air told him this would be the last stand, the final fight. He turned from the wall, his boots crunching on the gravel beneath him. His once bright uniform now bore the scars of countless battles, torn and weathered by time. He was not the young soldier who had enlisted all those years ago. No, David had become a man who understood what it meant to lose everything. Earth was gone, and his people were all but forgotten. As he walked toward the command center, the base was eerily quiet. The hum of machinery was the only sound, a faint reminder that humanity had once built great things. Inside the command center, the last remnants of Earth's military gathered, standing around a table covered with maps and data screens. Their faces were tired, their eyes empty. "Corporal," General Harrow greeted him, his voice low and gravely tired. "You're not planning on going out there alone again, are you?" David glanced at the screen. The alien fleet was larger today. More ships, more weapons, more death. The general was right. Every part of David's body told him to run, to hide, to fight another day. But there were no more days, no more time to waste. "We hold the line," David said firmly. "We have to." The general nodded but said nothing. Everyone knew it was over. It wasn't just a fight for Earth anymore. It was a fight for the very essence of what humanity had been. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the speakers. It wasn't the usual command chatter or a report. It was something different. The voice was clear and strong, cutting through the static like a knife. "This is Empress Tiara of the Galactic Alliance. I offer you peace." David froze. The Alien Empress? He had heard her name whispered in the darkest corners of the command room, but he had never expected to hear her speak. Tiara, the leader of the invaders, the one who had led her fleets to crush Earth's last resistance. Her name alone struck fear into the hearts of soldiers everywhere. David's eyes narrowed. This was not a trick. He could feel it. Something was different. The words she spoke were not the harsh commands or demands he expected from their enemy. It was as if she was offering something else. Peace? He straightened, stepping closer to the communication panel. The room fell silent. "Peace," David repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "We come to you with an offer," Tiara's voice continued, calm and commanding. "Join us. Lay down your arms and I will spare your people. I will give you a chance to rebuild." David's heart raced. It didn't make sense. The aliens had been merciless, leaving no survivors in the cities they had destroyed. Why would they suddenly offer peace? What was she playing at? The general spoke, his voice trembling. "It's a trick, Bryant. Don't trust her." But David didn't move. He felt a strange pull. He had fought for so long, lost so much, and yet now here she was, offering something more than destruction. He didn't understand it, but he couldn't ignore the possibility. "I will think about it," David said, his voice steady. The transmission went silent, leaving only the heavy weight of David's thoughts. What was he supposed to do now? Could he trust the Empress? Or was this the final deception in a war that had already cost him everything? Outside, the wind picked up again, and David stared out at the alien fleet. The ships loomed larger than ever, casting their dark shadow over the last remnants of Earth. His heart told him that this moment was different. This could be the turning point, but at what cost? The ground trembled slightly under his feet. In the distance, something shifted. A figure emerged from the darkness, standing in stark contrast to the enemy ships in the sky. A figure he never expected to see. The Empress. Tiara herself stood there, in the heart of the destruction. She was no longer the cold, untouchable leader of the invaders. No, she had come down to Earth herself. David's heart skipped a beat as their eyes met. She was close now, closer than any enemy had ever been. And yet there was something in her eyes, something that made him question everything he had ever known. He didn't know why she had come, but he knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary battle. This was a turning point. And somehow, in some way, it all rested on the decisions he would make next. The days passed slowly after the strange transmission. David couldn't shake the voice of Empress Tiara from his mind. Her words had lingered unanswered. Peace? Could he truly believe such a thing after all the death, destruction, and lies the invaders had brought? Was this just another ploy, another trap? He sat alone in his quarters, staring out at the endless dark sky through the small window. The stars seemed distant, almost unreachable. What did it mean for humanity if they surrendered now? What would happen to the survivors who had fought so hard to the bitter end? David knew that, deep down, the Earth he once knew was already gone. Maybe it was time for something new. He stood up and walked over to the communication panel. His fingers hovered over the controls for a moment before he finally pressed the button. The screen flickered, and the cold, clear voice of Empress Tiara echoed through the speakers again. "You have decided," she said, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "I will come to you." David swallowed hard. "You're coming here?" "I believe it is time we spoke in person." There was a long pause. David could feel his heart beating faster. Was he making a mistake? But he knew there was no turning back now. He had to see this through. The hangar doors opened with a heavy groan. David stood at the edge, his eyes scanning the area. The sky was clear now, the alien fleet looming far above, a reminder of the constant threat. But there, in the distance, a small craft descended slowly, its silhouette sharp against the darkened horizon. The air around David grew heavy as he waited. His soldiers, who had once stood with him in battle, now stood behind him, unsure of what was happening. They had followed him through every battle, but this felt different. The ship landed with a soft thud and the hatch opened. David's breath caught in his throat as she stepped out, Empress Tiara. She was even more imposing in person, tall, graceful, yet there was a coldness to her presence. Her armor, gleaming under the dim lights of the base, shimmered like liquid metal. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, met his with a quiet intensity. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind picked up, but the silence between them felt even heavier. David tried to steady his breath, his mind racing. This was no ordinary moment. Tiara's voice broke the silence. "You are not like the others," she said, her tone softer now, almost thoughtful. "Most would have attacked by now. But you hesitate." David looked at her, trying to read the woman who had led the galaxy's most powerful fleet. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he admitted. "After all the deaths, all the destruction, why should I trust you?" Her gaze softened, just slightly. "I do not expect you to trust me. I only offer you a choice." David glanced back at the soldiers behind him. They were nervous, some of them confused, others fearful, but they followed his lead. They always had. He took a deep breath and looked Tiara in the eye. "What kind of choice?" "Survival," she answered simply. "For your people, for mine. You can continue to fight and perhaps you will win. But at what cost? Earth will be nothing but a crater. and so will my empire. Or, we can join forces and change everything. David frowned. Join forces? He couldn't help but scoff. How do you expect me to believe that, after everything you've done? I did not choose this war, Tiara said, her voice quiet but firm. It was forced upon me by those who seek to destroy both of our worlds. My people are not as they appear. They follow those in power, not the truth. I have come to end the madness, and I believe you, Corporal Bryant, are the key. David shook his head, trying to wrap his mind around what she was saying. How could he trust her? He had watched his friends die, watched his world burn, and now she stood before him asking him to believe her, to fight alongside her. You ask a lot, David said slowly, his voice hard. You want me to betray everything I've fought for? Tiara's expression didn't change. She was used to this. I am not asking you to betray anything. I am asking you to fight for something greater than Earth or my empire. I am asking you to fight for a future where both our worlds can coexist. David remained silent for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. It was impossible to ignore the sincerity in her voice. There was something different about her, something that made him wonder if she truly believed in what she was saying. I don't trust you, he finally said. But maybe I'll give you a chance. Her lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. That is all I ask, Earth's last defender. As Tiara turned and walked back toward her ship, David felt a strange pull inside him. This was not the path he had imagined, but in his heart he knew that if they were to survive, if there was any chance for Earth to rise again, this strange alliance might be their only hope. Behind him, the soldiers were still unsure, but David didn't care. He had made his choice. The future of two worlds rested on what would happen next, and as the ship ascended into the sky, David realized that this was only the beginning of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and strange decisions. David knew he had made a dangerous choice, but there was no turning back now. The Empress Tiara had kept her word. She had not forced him into anything, but rather, she had offered him a partnership that went against everything David had fought for, everything he had believed in. The base was still on high alert, its soldiers torn between fear and hope. Some believed in David, trusted him with their lives, while others questioned his decision. The alliance with the Alien Empress was not something anyone had ever expected, least of all David himself. It was late one evening when David found himself standing in the command center, looking at the screen that displayed the alien fleet hovering far above Earth. The stars seemed so close, yet so distant. He still didn't understand it. How could Tiara, the leader of the invaders, care so much about saving Earth? The door behind him creaked open and he turned to see Tiara step inside. She was dressed in her usual gleaming armor, but her eyes were softer now, more human than he had ever seen them. You look troubled, she said quietly, her voice calm but full of meaning. David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned back to the screen, his fingers tapping the cold metal of the table. I don't know what to think anymore. I never expected to be here, standing beside you. Tiara walked closer, her steps light and graceful, almost ethereal. You have every reason to be suspicious. I understand that. I don't know what you want from me, David replied, his voice hardening. You destroyed my world, my people, and now you're offering peace? Is this all part of a bigger plan to destroy us? She shook her head, the expression on her face somber. It is not a plan to destroy. It is a plan to rebuild, but that cannot happen unless we work together. David's eyes met hers. Rebuild? After everything? After everything, Tiara confirmed softly. I know I am not the enemy you think I am. I never wanted this war. I never wanted to see your world destroyed, but those who came before me had no choice. They followed orders, and now I want to change that. David's heart skipped a beat. Could she really be telling the truth? Could the Empress of the most powerful empire in the galaxy truly want peace? Why? David asked, his voice quiet. Why do you want to change things? Her gaze softened, and for the first time he saw the true emotion in her eyes. Because I have seen what my people can do. I have seen the destruction they leave in their wake, and I will not let that be the legacy of my rule. I want something better. For us both. The words hung heavy in the air between them. David felt an overwhelming sense of confusion. The woman standing before him was the same one who had ordered the deaths of countless innocent civilians. And yet she stood here now offering peace. "How can I believe you?" David whispered, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. "After everything, how can I trust you?" Tiara stepped forward, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "Because I trust you, David. I believe in you. And that is why I came to you. Because I believe you can help me change the fate of both our worlds." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched on, heavy and uncertain. David's mind raced, trying to process the impossible situation he was in. He had spent his life fighting against invaders, against everything Tiara represented. But now everything had changed. Everything he had believed in seemed to be crumbling away. "You're asking me to choose," David said, his voice hoarse. "To choose between Earth and you." Tiara nodded slowly. "Yes, but I am not asking you to betray Earth. I am asking you to help me save it. And in return, we can save my people as well." David turned away from her, staring out the window once again. His heart was torn between the love he had for his people and the strange pull he felt toward Tiara. He had never imagined himself standing here, like this, with the woman who had led the forces that nearly wiped out humanity. But now there was something else. Something he couldn't deny. He felt it in his chest, in his bones. A connection, an undeniable force that drew him to her. "This is madness," he whispered. "But I can't ignore what I feel. I don't know what to do." Tiara reached out, her hand hovering near his arm. "You don't have to decide now. But when you're ready, when you truly understand what we can do together, I'll be here." David's mind was in turmoil. He had never imagined such a choice. Love, peace, survival, what did they all mean now? Could he really stand by and watch Tiara fight her own people to change the future? Could he stand beside the woman who had brought so much destruction and still believe in her cause? He looked back at her, her face a mixture of hope and uncertainty. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. He could no longer deny what was between them. It wasn't just a question of alliances or power. It was something deeper, something that tied their fates together in ways he had never expected. "I don't know where this will lead," David said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I'm willing to see it through." Tiara's eyes softened, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Thank you, David." And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, David allowed himself to believe that there might be hope, not just for Earth, but for the future of both their worlds. The days after their conversation felt like a blur to David. The decision he had made weighed on him constantly. The alliance with Tiara was still so new, so fragile, and yet it seemed as though the entire fate of the world and beyond rested on his shoulders. Every step he took seemed to echo louder than the last, every choice more critical than the one before it. David spent his time divided between training his soldiers and speaking with Tiara, who had stayed in the human command center, a constant reminder of the dangerous path he had chosen. Their conversations were often long, filled with doubts and discussions of strategy. Slowly, the lines between enemy and ally began to blur. Tiara was no longer just the cold ruler of an alien empire. She was becoming something else to David. Someone he felt he could trust. Someone he felt drawn to. But despite the growing bond between them, there was always a gnawing feeling in the back of David's mind. The soldiers under his command were still skeptical, still unsure about the alliance. Many refused to trust Tiara, and they looked to David for answers. He couldn't blame them. After all, he didn't fully understand it himself. One evening, as the two of them sat in the command room, studying battle plans and discussing future actions, a sharp alarm suddenly sounded. The base's security system blared through the halls, sending a ripple of panic through the soldiers. David stood up immediately, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at his side. "What's happening?" he demanded, his voice tense. "It's coming from the outer perimeter," one of the soldiers replied, fear and confusion in his eyes. "We've detected a breach. Unauthorized ships are approaching." David's heart sank. They had been expecting reinforcements, but they were supposed to be under strict orders. Could this be the enemy, trying to take advantage of their weakened state? Or was something far more treacherous at play? Tara's eyes narrowed. She stood up, her posture stiff, her hands clenched at her sides. "I will handle this," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Stay here. I will meet with the commanders." David felt a sudden surge of doubt. He didn't want her to go. Not now, not when everything felt so precarious. But he also knew she was their only hope, their only way out of this war. He nodded, forcing himself to trust her. As Tiara left the room, David turned to the soldiers. "Stay alert," he ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. "We don't know who these ships belong to, but I won't let anyone threaten this base." The minutes stretched on endlessly as David paced back and forth, his mind racing. What could be happening? Who could be attacking them? And why had Tiara not kept him informed of the situation? Then, just as his anxiety was beginning to rise, the communications panel flickered to life. A harsh, grating voice came through the speakers. "Bryant," the voice spat. "We have what we came for." David's heart froze in his chest. He recognized the voice. It was General Harrow, the man who had once stood beside him in every battle, the man who had trusted him with everything. Now his voice was filled with venom, with betrayal. "What do you mean?" David demanded, his hands clenching into fists. "You've made a deal with the enemy, Bryant," Harrow sneered, "and now we're taking it all back." David's mind raced. What was happening? He couldn't believe it. The base was under attack, but not from the alien invaders. No, it was from the people he had once fought beside, the ones who had sworn to defend Earth. And worse still, it appeared that Harrow had turned against him. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound David had ever received. He had trusted Harrow. They had fought side by side. But now Harrow was leading an attack against his own people. All because of David's decision to join forces with Tiara. "You don't have to do this," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't the way." "We've seen what you've done," Harrow's voice crackled with malice. "You've betrayed everything we fought for. You've sided with the enemy. You've lost your loyalty, Bryant." David could hear the sound of weapons being raised, the hum of energy shields powering up. It was clear now. This was no longer about survival. It was about David's loyalty, his willingness to fight against everything he had once believed in. Without a second thought, David turned and ran toward the hangar. He had to stop Harrow before it was too late. The base was falling apart, and David knew he was the only one who could stop the chaos from spreading further. He could not let Harrow destroy everything they had fought to rebuild. As David approached the hangar, he saw the betrayal unfold before his eyes. Harrow and his men, once part of the very force David had led, were now turning their weapons against the soldiers he had sworn to protect. They fired without mercy, their blasts striking down anyone who stood in their way. David's heart burned with anger. He rushed forward, shouting for his soldiers to fall back. He couldn't believe what was happening. The betrayal was too much to bear. But as he drew closer to the enemy forces, a figure appeared in front of him, Tiara. Her armor gleamed under the dim lights of the hangar. Her face set in a grim expression. "This is your doing," David said, his voice shaking with fury. "You've tricked us. You've used us all." Tiara's eyes darkened. "This is not what I wanted," she said, her voice filled with regret. "I didn't know they would act so quickly. I didn't know Harrow was going to betray you." David's anger flared. But in that moment he realized something. Tiara wasn't the enemy. Harrow was. The betrayal was not her fault. She too was caught in this web of lies just as he was. "We can still stop this," Tiara said, her voice determined. "We can end this together." David looked at her, his chest tightening. Could he truly trust her? Could he put his faith in the one woman who had once led the forces against Earth? Or was the betrayal too much to overcome? The answer was clear. He had no choice. For better or for worse, David had to fight. He had to fight for what was left of humanity, and for the chance to rebuild a future alongside the one person who understood the weight of the world's destruction. The hangar was filled with the sound of gunfire, explosions and shouting. The battle for Earth's last stronghold had reached its breaking point. David's world, which had already been shattered, was now crumbling into chaos. Harrow's betrayal had fractured what little unity remained among the soldiers, and now David found himself standing at the crossroads of survival, loyalty, and an uncertain future. Tiara stood beside him, her armor stained with the dust of battle, her face grim. The alien forces led by her had already engaged Harrow's traitors, but the situation was far from under control. As the leader of the human resistance, Harrow knew how to command his soldiers. His betrayal was more than just an attack on David. It was an attack on everything they had fought to preserve. David's hand gripped his rifle tightly, the weight of it grounding him in the chaos. He could hear the screams of his fellow soldiers, the cries of those he had sworn to protect. The fight was no longer about Earth or even about humanity's survival. It was now about stopping a war that threatened to destroy both worlds. David. Tiara's voice broke through the cacophony of battle. We need to push forward. If we don't act now, Harrow will take control. We can't let that happen. David turned to her, his heart heavy with doubt. How do I know I can trust you? He asked, his voice hoarse. You've seen what's happened. You've seen the destruction. How do I know this alliance is the right choice? Tiara's eyes met his, unwavering. You don't have to trust me, she said quietly. But you have to trust what's left of us, the ones who are still standing, still fighting. We're your only hope. David took a deep breath, his mind racing. His instincts told him to fight, to defend Earth at all costs. But his heart told him that there was more at stake now than just one planet. This was about saving both Earth and Tiara's world from the madness that had taken root in both of their empires. He nodded, making his decision. Let's end this. The soldiers fought valiantly, but it was clear that the tide of the battle had shifted. Harrow's forces were entrenched, their positions fortified, and the alien fleet above Earth was large enough to obliterate what remained of humanity. Despite the power of Tiara's army, David knew that numbers alone wouldn't win the fight. It would take more than strength. It would take unity. David pushed forward, rallying the remaining soldiers, leading them into the fray. His every step felt heavy, burdened with the weight of the decisions he had made, but his resolve never wavered. The soldiers behind him followed, hesitant at first, but they trusted him. They had no other choice but to follow their last hope. Tiara led her forces to the outer perimeter, her alien troops pushing against the fortified defenses. But there was something else she had been preparing for. As they fought, she signaled to David, her eyes locking with his for a brief moment. She understood. He understood. David moved swiftly, coordinating with his remaining soldiers to break through Harrow's defenses. The battle was chaotic, unpredictable, but David's focus was clear. He would not let Harrow win, not after everything they had endured. The explosion of a nearby enemy vehicle threw David to the ground, his head spinning. His vision blurred for a moment, but when he regained his bearings, he saw Harrow standing before him, gun drawn, his face twisted in rage. You've betrayed us all. Bryant, Harrow spat, his voice filled with venom. You think you can save us? You think you can save your people by joining with them? You're nothing more than a pawn. David slowly stood, brushing the dust from his uniform, his rifle still clutched tightly in his hands. He looked at Harrow, feeling a deep sense of loss. The man who had once been his closest ally, his friend, had now become the enemy, and in that moment David knew he had to end it, for the sake of everything they had fought for. You've lost your way, Harrow, David said, his voice steady despite the weight of the battle around them. This isn't about loyalty anymore. It's about survival. You're so focused on your hatred that you can't see what's at stake. Harrow's face twisted with fury. Survival? You think I don't understand that? I'm fighting for the survival of humanity, Bryant, not for some alien empire. Tiara's voice rang out from behind David, her words cutting through the chaos. You're fighting for a future that doesn't exist anymore, Harrow, she called. We can't go back. All we have now is what we make of the future. David turned to her, his heart heavy with emotion. The love they had shared, the trust they had built. Was it enough to bridge the gap between their worlds? Was it enough to heal the wounds that had been inflicted? Harrow's eyes flicked between the two of them, his anger growing. You think she's your salvation, don't you? He sneered at David. She's the enemy. Always has been. And now you're just another puppet. David raised his rifle, his gaze unwavering. I'm not a puppet, he said firmly. I'm a man fighting for what's right. The air between them was thick with tension. For a moment, everything felt still. Then, with a sudden movement, Harrow lunged at David, his gun aimed directly at his chest. David acted instinctively, sidestepping just in time to avoid the blast. In one swift motion, he knocked Harrow's weapon from his hand, wrestling the man to the ground. The two men struggled, each fighting with the last of their strength. But in the end, it was David who stood over Harrow, his heart heavy with the realization of what he had lost. The fight was over. The betrayal had been undone, but at what cost? Let it go, Harrow, David said, his voice soft yet firm. It's over. Harrow glared up at him, but there was no fight left in him. He knew the war was lost. The future was no longer in his hands. Tiara stepped forward, her eyes somber as she gazed down at Harrow. "It's done," she said quietly. "Now we rebuild." David looked at her, the weight of their journey heavy on both of them. The future was uncertain, but for the first time he saw a glimmer of hope. A future that could be shared. A future where Earth and the alien empire could finally come together. As the battle winds down, David and Tiara stand side by side, watching the destruction. But now they are no longer enemies. They are partners. And together they would fight for the future of both worlds. The final stand had been made. The fate of two worlds had changed.